Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking through all of the books that I read in the month of September and what I got up to, but I did not get up to a lot in September, so it's going to be mostly books and it's going to be pretty short, I think. So we'll stop September wrap up because there's not loads to talk about. In the month of September I read 5 books coming to a total of 2,844 pages, so relatively long. One of them you'll know about is very long. One of them was a romance, one was more of a fantasy romance, 3 of them were solid fantasy, all 5 of the books were adult. Pretty solid reading month in terms of my star ratings. I gave 4 4 stars and 1 5 star. I continued in 3 series, so made some good progress there. And I think my on the go is still at 29, 28, 29, it's around there. We'll need to check, probably imminently actually, so that I can start doing my preparing for my series wrap up at the end, my November time, series check-in, wrap up, full update on it. But before I do that, I have to do some more I need to finish some more finales. And then in terms of I got up to, I did not get up to a lot. I did not, because of having surgery towards the end of August, although September I've been a lot better and I feel as though I am getting back to health now. I am I think I'm back. I think I'm pretty much back. I've done a lot of resting. So I was still off work for the first week, so that was fully resting pretty much, and then I started back at work and that was really draining because I was working from home for the most part, but working and then just being so tired at the end of the day because it took so much energy to sit up straight. I think it was just quite a slow month. It was quite a slow month of just slowly regaining my health and some energy, which I think I'm still on the path to. I don't think I'm back to full energy yet and still getting there, but a lot more progress. And I started doing some exercise, so now that we're in October, I got to my 6-week post-surgery mark and I was like, oh, I can finally do more than just walk. So we're getting there. But that meant I didn't really get up to much in September. I didn't make loads of plans. I didn't do loads of activities. I didn't really travel. One of the highlights, I took my dad out in London for his birthday. So his birthday was in May, but his present that I got for him was a day out to the Postal Museum. He loves stamps. There were stamps. He loves train rides. There was an underground train ride. So we did that as a father-daughter day. But that I feel was one of my main outings. I also went book shopping. I did some brunches, but overall it was a pretty chilled, staying in my local area type of month. No big adventuring. The biggest adventures were into central London. So talking through what I read, which is not loads. So started off the month with romance. So I read Heartless, which is the second book in the Chestnut Spring series. I'm not really counting this as a series because I sort of see them as standalones, but I read the second one in that. I preferred this one to the first one. I actually liked it quite a bit more than the first one. I think the character dynamic just worked quite well for me. I listened to it as an audiobook. I pretty much got through it in a day or two. It was very easy to read. So the setup of this farm and family is set up in the first book. And so we're following Cade, who is, I guess, more of the grumpier figure within this family. And he has a son from a marriage that did not work out. And then at the beginning of the book, he's trying to hire a nanny to look after his son during the summer months. And our main female character comes in and is the nanny. And at first they don't seem to really get along. And they have sort of conflicts, but in the end, a romance ensues. So I did quite enjoy it. There were some things towards the end which I didn't quite enjoy in terms of a trope that isn't my favourite, but in terms of the way the story was structured, I quite enjoyed it. I enjoyed the 2 characters' dynamics and the side characters as well. So I think it was well done. I do enjoy the setting, which is a rural Canada. So it was fun. It was just a fun time. And the other romance that I read fantasy romance was the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. This is more on the romance. I didn't know whether to class this as romance or fantasy romance, but it does have fantasy elements in it, even though it is predominantly, I guess, a romance. It's set in our real world. We're following our female main character, Vivian Jones, who is a witch. 9 years ago, she started dating this guy called Reese Penhallow. Things didn't end particularly well, so she curses him. She doesn't mean to. It's it was a cheap candle. joking, had a couple of drinks and was just like, I curse you. And it actually worked. It wasn't meant to. They weren't practicing magic, her and her cousin, when they did it, but it's worked. And when Rhys comes back into town to sort of fix the ley lines, because he is part of like the original family that founded this place, the curse sort of strikes and it is upheaval and drama and everything going awry, and these two coming back together and trying to fix the situation and realise that when their relationship ended 9 years ago, it was a bit of a miscommunication. So I overall enjoyed this, enjoyed our two characters together. I enjoyed the sort of witchy setting in terms of this like small rural town in America. I liked her main characters, I liked their dynamic, I thought it was fun. I just found this a lot of fun. It was a really fun time, it was a very easy read. I wanted to make sure I got this in during September-October time, because I think I've owned this for a couple of years and I was like, this is a September-October book. I have to read this around this time of year. Even though I'm not much of a seasonal reader, I'm not, but I just felt like this book had to be read. And so I put it into September because that way it was done, it was covered, and I wasn't going to get to the end of October and be like, I missed it again. So this was a fun time. I think I'd recommend it if you would want a witchy romance. Definitely ticked those boxes. One that I have spoken about at length in a video, so you know this one's coming. It's the big one that I spent the first week of September reading whilst I was off work, and that's Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive. So I do have a whole video detailing my thoughts, theories, spoilers, everything to do with this book, which is up now, so you can go check that out if you've read the book. I wouldn't recommend it if you have not read the book, because then you would just be spoiling yourself and setting yourself up for probably disappointment, but spoilers. This one I read, thoroughly enjoyed. It's taken me a long while to get to this. I'd started it in April, read about 200 pages in April, then put it down because I was like, I can't do this. I am not in the good, like, it took me like the whole month to read those 200 pages. So I put it down and then came back to it whilst I was still off work, but in a better headspace than in the first week. It was just the perfect time because I had the time to dedicate to it. I became, like, my work was this book. I was theorising, I was reading the book, and then I was like thinking about it as kind of theories. It was like, this book took over my first week of September. It was all I thought about. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed this continuation in this series. It took me a long time to read, and I do find these books quite daunting and chunky, but I had a great time reading this. I had a really great time reading this. This was my, like, favourite book of the month, and I absolutely loved it. I love seeing where our characters get to. I love how in-depth the world is and how much we can learn about the world and the characters and the different connections, and I love seeing the different links between the books and the Cosmere, and not just the story that's going on here, but also the wider plot with the Cosmere. I find that so interesting and thrilling to read. I'm intrigued to see where it's all going to go, but probably not intrigued enough to read with Wind and Truth this year. But I absolutely loved it, thoroughly enjoyed it, and had a great time. I haven't actually talked about what the plot of this first book is, but you know, epic fantasy series, multiple cast of characters. It definitely expands a lot from the first book. It starts off with like the murder of a king, and then two people's at war over this and the conflict that ensues, and it gets a lot bigger than that. Some interesting magic, very interesting magic systems in here, and had a great time with this. And then I did work on a couple of other series and a couple of other sequels. These ones it took me a lot longer to read. By the time I got to this point, it was taking me like a full week to read the book. That I started back at work, and by the time I got to the end of the workday, no reading was happening. I was zombie, so it was like I was reading at the weekends, and then during the week it was like 15 pages, 10 pages, and so yeah, I didn't get through loads. But I did read The Atlas Paradox, which is the sequel to The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I enjoyed this one. I was a bit surprised because I was a bit nervous going into it, having seen what the Goodreads rating says for this series. It definitely goes downhill, and I'd say I enjoyed this, I'd say an equal amount to the Atlas 6. Like, it was pretty similar playing field really between the two of them. The Atlas 6, if you don't know, it follows 6 characters enter the Alexandrian Society. They are all sort of experts in their field. They all have different magics and are seen as like the best in the world or the best in class for their magic. Some of them have more elemental magic, some of them have more mental magic, so they have different skill sets, and they're going in and they are spending that year researching and learning and realising excelling in their craft, knowing that only 5 of them can continue into the second year, which is where we are getting into in the sequel. I definitely continue to enjoy it. I enjoyed all of our perspectives and the twists and turns and sort of the way that magic and academia is explored in here. I do find these books a little bit slower. They're not the fastest of reads, and I do think Olivia Blake's writing style is quite unique. I don't really know how to describe it. It's quite wordy. It's quite wordy, maybe. So it is a unique writing style, and I think that's in some ways why her books don't always work for everybody. And I am interested to see how this all concludes, because I think that one's got even worse Goodreads ratings, and it's a question of actually whether she's better writing standalones or series. I mean, so far I've enjoyed this series, but I mean, that's going to depend on how it's all going to end. Whereas I know that her standalones have always hit for me, because I've also read Alone with You in the Ether and One for My Enemy. There's another one that she has which I haven't read. Overall, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed seeing the continuation of where we got to. I do find all of our characters really interesting, and the dynamics that they have. They're not necessarily the most likeable, they're not, but I think they're all very interesting to read from. So definitely intrigued to see how this all wraps up. And then the final book that I finished in the month of September was Silverthorn by Raymond Feist, the 3rd book in the, it's not the Magician series, it's going to be like the Rift War cycle. I can't remember if like the Rift War cycle or saga is all of the series within that, or if it's the name of the first one. But the first book in this one being Magician, which I read in August. Okay, was it August? July? I read it earlier this year. So I continued with the 3rd one. I really enjoyed this one. I particularly enjoyed the first half of this one. It went in a different direction to I was necessarily expecting. I mean, I didn't have loads of expectations going into it, but it went a little bit off, without like going too much into the plot of this one, because obviously it is the 3rd one in the series. But I do sort of feel as though the first 2 books stand as like an arc, and then potentially this one and the next one stand as like an arc within this series. Potentially that's one of the reasons why the first 2 were put into a bind up, because they sort of work together, whereas this one does sort of some time has moved on and we're following sort of some different perspectives. I particularly liked in the first half that it has more of a horror lean to it, that it is obviously a fantasy, but there were some very horrifying moments which were quite chilling to read. So I enjoyed those elements that got mixed in, and that was particularly prevalent in the first half of the book, and then it goes off on a little bit more of like an adventure tangent, which I still enjoyed, but I think the first half was stronger. And I do feel as though the ending was a little bit anticlimactic. So I am interested to see how this series all wraps up. I'm not sure when I'm going to get to it. Maybe like November time I'll get to the 4th book in this series. So far I've been really enjoying it. It's very classic. It's a very classic fantasy, and this isn't a cozy fantasy. It's not. I mean, I've described the horror elements that are in this, but I do find it quite cozy in that it's quite reassuring in some ways. It feels very classic. It's a very classic fantasy, and I find that quite, I don't know, like you're curled up. It's cozy. I just find it very comforting to read. I find the sort of classicness of it quite comforting. So yeah, would recommend if that's something that you enjoy. So that is everything that I read in the month of September. Not loads, but I did enjoy everything, which is the point, that you're enjoying everything that you're reading. And I made some great progress in some of my series. I know when I went into September, I had a whole list of like sequels and series that I wanted to work on, and I did not get to them. And I'm continuing to slowly make progress in that list through October. That it hasn't been quite as quick as I'd maybe hoped of working my way through those sequels, but I did throw in Rhythm of War into September, which is a very, very big sequel that had been on my TBR for a very long time. So although I didn't get to things like The Ending Fire and The Oleander Sword, or continued with Veronica Speedwell, or yeah, many other sequels and series that I did not get to, I did get to Rhythm of War, which sort of takes the place of like multiple books considering the size and scope of it. So I'm very happy with how I did. Let me know how your reading went in September, or I guess October by the time you're seeing this, because it is approaching the middle of the month. Let me know how your reading has been going, and if you have any thoughts on any of these books that I have mentioned. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!